The whetstone sang its metallic song against the axe blade, and Lily Jane felt the vibration travel through her calloused fingers as she worked in the fading afternoon light of the Northern California lumber camp. Sparks danced like fireflies in the November dusk of 1878, and she counted each stroke with the grim determination of someone who knew exactly how many sharp edges stood between her and an empty stomach tonight. "That makes 17, she muttered to herself, setting the freshly honed axe against the weathered stump that served as her workbench. Her back ached from hunching over the grindstone since dawn, and her shoulders burned with a familiar fire that no amount of rest seemed to quench any more. The logging camp sprawled around her in the Sierra Nevada foothills, just outside Jamestown, California. A rough collection of canvas tents and crude wooden structures where men came to strip the mountains bare and women came only when desperation left them no other choice. Lily was 22 years old, though her hands looked a decade older. She had arrived in this camp 6 weeks ago with nothing but the clothes on her back and a determination to survive that surprised even herself. The foreman, a thick-necked man named Hutchins, had laughed when she asked for work hauling timber or working the saws. But when she had picked up a dull axe and asked if she could sharpen it for him, he had grunted and said if she did a decent job, he might throw her some scraps from the cookhouse. That first night, she had sharpened 4 axes and earned half a loaf of bread and some cold beans. Now, 6 weeks later, she sharpened 20 to 30 blades a day and earned a full supper, though she often had to fight off the wandering hands of loggers who thought a woman alone was fair game for whatever they pleased. She reached for the next axe in the pile, examining the blade with a critical eye. The edge was chipped badly, probably from striking stone hidden beneath bark. This would take extra time, and the light was fading fast. Her stomach growled, reminding her that breakfast had been nothing but weak coffee and a crust of stale cornbread. "You planning to sharpen axes all night long, or are you going to eat something before you collapse?" The voice startled her so badly that she nearly dropped the axe. Lily spun around to find a man standing a few feet away, silhouetted against the setting sun. He was tall, lean, and wearing the distinctive garb of a cowboy rather than a logger-worn leather chaps over dark trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his features. A horse stood behind him, a magnificent sorrel mare with a white blaze down her face. "I will eat when I have finished my work," Lily said sharply, turning back to her whetstone. She had learned quickly that showing weakness or friendliness to strange men in this camp led nowhere good. "That pile looks like it could keep you busy until midnight," the man observed, not moving away. His voice had a warm, drawling quality that spoke of somewhere south and west of here, maybe Texas or New Mexico territory. "When was the last time you ate a hot meal? That is none of your concern." Lily began working the damaged blade against the stone, putting extra force into each stroke to emphasize her point. The man was quiet for a moment, and she hoped he would take the hint and leave. Instead, she heard his boots crunch on the gravel as he moved closer. From the corner of her eye, she saw him crouch down to examine her work. "You are good at this," he said with genuine appreciation in his tone. "These edges are clean and true. Most folks do not understand the proper angle for a felling axe versus a splitting axe." Despite herself, Lily felt a small flush of pride. "My father was a blacksmith," she said, then immediately regretted offering any personal information. "Before he died. I am sorry for your loss." The simple words carried real sympathy, and Lily found herself glancing up at the stranger. With the sun no longer directly behind him, she could see his face more clearly. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with weathered skin that spoke of years under the sun, sharp cheekbones, and eyes the color of creek water in summer, that particular shade of blue-green that seemed to change with the light. A few days' worth of stubble covered his jaw, and dark hair curled slightly beneath the brim of his hat. "Thank you," she said quietly, then returned her attention to the axe. "But sympathy does not put food on a plate, so I need to finish this work." The cowboy stood up, and Lily thought he would finally leave. Instead, he said, "Wait here," and walked back toward his horse. She watched him dig through his saddlebags and pull out a cloth-wrapped bundle. When he returned, he held it out to her. "What is this?" she asked suspiciously. "Food." "I stopped at the general store in Jamestown this morning, got more than I need." Lily did not reach for the bundle. "I do not take charity." "It is not charity. It is common decency. You are working yourself to the bone, and no one should sharpen blades on an empty stomach. Too easy to make a mistake and lose a finger. I have been managing just fine for weeks now." "Have you?" He gestured to her hands, and she instinctively curled her fingers to hide the cuts and blisters that covered her palms. "Those look painful. And you have got shadows under your eyes that say you are not sleeping much either. Again, none of your concern." But even as she spoke, her eyes kept drifting to the cloth bundle. She could smell something savory, and her stomach twisted with hunger. The cowboy sighed and set the bundle down on her workbench. "My name is Xavier Ashford. I am passing through, looking for some lost cattle that wandered off from a herd being driven north. I will be camping just outside the logging camp tonight, and tomorrow I will move on. I am not asking anything from you except that you take a few minutes to eat something before you faint. If that is too much charity for your pride to handle, then consider it payment for information." "What information?" Lily asked warily. "Have you seen any stray cattle around here?" "About a dozen head, mixed brands, probably wandering together," she thought for a moment. "There were some cows down by the creek 2 days ago. I went to fetch water and saw them drinking. They moved off west toward the higher elevations." Xavier nodded. "That helps. So the food is payment for that information. Fair trade." It was a transparent excuse, and they both knew it, but it gave Lily a way to accept without feeling like she was taking charity. She hesitated another moment, then set down the axe and carefully unwrapped the bundle. Inside was a thick slice of ham, 2 biscuits, and a chunk of sharp cheese. Her mouth watered at the sight. "Put that axe down and eat," Xavier said gently. "The blades will still be there in 15 minutes. Lily looked at the pile of unfinished work, then at the food, then at the stranger who had shown her more kindness in 5 minutes than anyone in this camp had shown her in 6 weeks. She made her decision and picked up one of the biscuits, biting into it with an appreciation that was almost painful. The bread was fresh and buttery, so different from the hard, stale scraps she usually received from the cookhouse. Xavier smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to genuinely striking. "There. Was that so difficult?" "Yes," Lily said honestly, but there was the ghost of a smile on her own lips. He settled himself on a log near her workbench, apparently content to keep her company while she ate. "How did you end up sharpening axes in a logging camp?" he asked. "Seems like there would be easier ways to earn a living." Lily swallowed a bite of ham before answering. "Easier ways require money or connections, neither of which I have. My father died 18 months ago. He was a blacksmith in Sacramento, had a good business, but he owed debts I did not know about. After he passed, the creditors took everything: the shop, the tools, even the house. I tried to find work in Sacramento, but no one wants to hire a woman for smith work, and the only other jobs available were in saloons or brothels." She saw Xavier's jaw tighten slightly at that, but he did not interrupt. I heard the logging camps sometimes needed help, so I made my way up here. Jamestown was closer than the camps further north, so I started here. Like I said, they would not give me real work, but Hutchins said I could sharpen tools for meals. She shrugged as if it did not matter, though the helplessness and anger of her situation still burned in her chest every day. It keeps me fed, mostly. Mostly, Xavier repeated quietly. What happens when winter really sets in? These camps thin out when the snow comes. I will figure something out, I always do. You are too stubborn to starve, I suppose. Exactly. They sat in companionable silence while Lily finished the food. She ate slowly, making each bite last, savoring flavors and textures she had almost forgotten existed. The cheese was particularly good, sharp and creamy at the same time. When she finally folded up the cloth and handed it back to Xavier, he waved it away. "Keep it, might be useful." "Thank you," she said, and this time she meant it without reservation. "For the food and for treating me like a person instead of a— well, thank you." Xavier's expression darkened. "Have the men here been bothering you?" "Nothing I cannot handle," Lily said quickly, not wanting to invite trouble. "I carry a knife and I have made it clear I know how to use it. Good. Though you should not have to defend yourself just to earn an honest living." He stood and stretched, joints popping audibly. "I should make camp before it gets full dark, but I will be around tomorrow morning if you need anything, and if you see those cattle again, I would appreciate you pointing me in the right direction." "I will keep an eye out," Lily promised. Xavier tipped his hat to her, a courtly gesture that seemed out of place in the rough logging camp, then walked back to his horse. Lily watched him mount up with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle. He touched the brim of his hat to her once more, then rode off toward the edge of camp. Lily sat for a moment longer, feeling stronger and more alert than she had in weeks. The food had helped, but so had the conversation. She realized with a pang how lonely she had been, speaking to no one except to negotiate payment for her work or to tell drunk loggers to leave her alone. Xavier had talked to her like an equal, like someone whose thoughts and experiences mattered. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. He was just passing through, looking for lost cattle. By tomorrow or the next day he would be gone, and she would be back to her solitary routine. There was no point in dwelling on a brief moment of kindness. Lily picked up the chipped axe and returned to her work. The light was almost gone now, but she could work by feel when necessary. The whetstone sang its song and sparks flew into the gathering darkness. She finished 3 more axes before the foreman came by to collect the day's work. Hutchins was a burly man with a thick beard and small, mean eyes. He counted the sharpened tools with exaggerated care, as if expecting to catch her trying to cheat him. 20 axes, 2 saws, he grunted. "That earns you supper. Go to the cookhouse and tell them I sent you." Lily nodded and gathered her few belongings, the cloth Xavier had given her, her knife, and a battered tin cup. The cookhouse was a long, low building that smelled of grease and wood smoke. She got in line behind a group of loggers, keeping her eyes down and her shoulders hunched to make herself as small and unnoticeable as possible. The cook, a sour-faced woman named Mrs. Brennan, slapped a ladle of thin stew and a piece of cornbread onto a dented tin plate and thrust it at Lily without a word. Lily took it gratefully and found a corner to sit in, away from the rough tables where the loggers gathered. The stew was mostly water with a few sad vegetables and possibly some meat, though it was hard to tell. After the ham and biscuits Xavier had given her, it tasted even worse than usual, but Lily ate every drop. She had learned the hard way never to waste food, no matter how unappetizing. As she ate, she listened to the conversations around her. The loggers talked about work, about pay, about women in crude terms that made her stomach turn. A few cast glances in her direction, and she hunched further into her corner, trying to be invisible. One man, a tall logger named Frank who had tried to corner her twice before, was staring at her with an expression she did not like. Lily quickly finished her meal and slipped out of the cookhouse before he could approach. The night was cold, and frost was already forming on the ground. Lily made her way to the small lean-to she had constructed at the edge of camp, nothing more than some boards and a piece of canvas stretched over a frame. It kept off most of the rain and blocked some of the wind, but it was far from comfortable. She wrapped herself in her blanket, the only one she owned, and lay down on the hard ground. Sleep was a long time coming. Her muscles ached, her hands throbbed, and despite the food in her stomach, she felt hollow and empty. Lily found herself thinking about Xavier, about his easy kindness and the way he had treated her with respect. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her like she mattered. Most people looked through her as if she were not even there, or they looked at her with contempt or lust, but never with simple human decency. She wondered where he was camping, if he was warm, if he had found his lost cattle. Then she told herself firmly to stop wondering about a stranger who would be gone in a day or two. Tomorrow would be the same as today. Wake before dawn, sharpen axes until her hands bled, earn a meager supper, and collapse in exhausted sleep. That was her life now, and pointless daydreams about kind cowboys would not change it. But when she finally drifted off to sleep, Lily dreamed of blue-green eyes and a warm smile, and for the first time in months, her dreams were not nightmares. The next morning dawned clear and bitterly cold. Lily woke with frost in her hair and her breath misting in the air. She forced herself up, wrapped her blanket around her shoulders like a shawl, and made her way to the camp's water pump. Ice had formed in the bucket overnight, and she had to break through it to splash freezing water on her face. Other workers were stirring, emerging from tents and shelters with sleep-blurred faces. Lily kept her head down and hurried back to her workbench, where a new pile of dull axes and saws awaited her. Hutchins must have added them during the night. She built a small fire to warm her hands enough to work, then settled into her routine. The whetstone, the blade, the rhythmic scrape of metal on stone. Her mind went blank, thinking of nothing but the angle of the edge and the feel of the steel. She had been working for perhaps an hour when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Lily looked up to see Xavier riding into camp on his sorrel mare. Despite herself, her heart gave a small leap at the sight of him. He dismounted and walked over to her workbench, leading his horse. In the morning light, she could see him more clearly than she had the evening before. He had shaved, and his face looked younger without the stubble. There was a small scar above his left eyebrow and another along his jaw, both old and faded. "Morning," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I wanted to thank you again for the information about the cattle. I found their trail heading west, just like you said." "I am glad I could help," Lily said. "Did you find them?" "Not yet, but I am close. They left clear tracks in the frost." He paused, studying her. "You look cold." "It is November in the mountains. Everyone is cold, some more than others. Do you have a proper coat?" Lily gestured to her thin woolen blanket now draped over her shoulders. "I have this." Xavier frowned. "That is not enough for winter up here. The real cold has not even started yet." "I am aware of that, but coats cost money I do not have." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have an extra one in my saddlebags. It is too small for me anyway. Let me get it." "No," Lily said firmly. "You already gave me food yesterday. I will not take more charity." "It is not charity if I trade it for something." "What could I possibly give you in trade? I have nothing." Xavier looked at the pile of tools waiting to be sharpened. "What if you sharpened my knife? It has been getting dull, and I have been meaning to take care of it but never get around to it." Lily studied him suspiciously. This was clearly another excuse, but she was cold enough to consider accepting it. "Let me see the knife." He pulled a large hunting knife from a sheath on his belt and handed it to her. Lily examined the blade carefully. It was good steel, well made, and while it could use sharpening, it was far from dull. Still, the fiction allowed her to keep her pride. "I can sharpen this," she said. "It will take about 15 minutes, and I will get you that coat." Xavier walked back to his horse and rummaged in his saddlebags, while Lily tested the knife's edge against her thumb. It was a beautiful piece of work, with a bone handle and a blade that had been cared for lovingly. She could tell it meant something to him, which made the trade feel slightly more real and less like charity. He returned with a heavy coat made of brown canvas lined with sheepskin. It was worn but clean, and when he held it out to her, Lily could feel the warmth radiating from the wool. "Try it on," Xavier urged. Lily set down the knife and slipped her arms into the coat. It was too large for her, meant for a man's broader shoulders, but it was warm beyond measure. She pulled it close around her body and felt heat seep into her bones for the first time in weeks. "It fits well enough," Xavier said with satisfaction. "Keep it. I should sharpen your knife first to make the trade fair. I trust you to do it. I need to get back on the trail anyway. Those cattle are not going to find themselves." He was already moving toward his horse, and Lily realized he was deliberately leaving before she could argue further. She hurried after him, still wearing the coat. "Wait," she called. "When will you be back for your knife?" Xavier swung up into the saddle and looked down at her. "I will be back. Not sure exactly when, but I will find you. Do not worry." "I am not worried," Lily said, though that was not entirely true. "I just want to return your knife when I am finished. Keep it safe for me," he said with a smile. Then he touched his hat brim again and rode off, leaving Lily standing in the cold morning air wearing a coat that smelled faintly of leather and sage, and something else she could not quite identify. She watched him go until he disappeared among the pine trees, then looked down at the knife still in her hand. It was an expensive blade, worth more than she could earn in months of sharpening axes. The fact that he had left it with her, trusting her not to sell it or run off with it, meant something she could not quite articulate. Lily returned to her workbench and carefully set the knife aside. She would sharpen it later, when she had time to do the job properly. Right now, she needed to work on the camp's tools before Hutchins came looking for her. But she kept the coat on while she worked, and for the first time since arriving at the logging camp, her fingers did not go numb from the cold. The next 3 days fell into a strange new rhythm. Each morning, Lily would wake and wonder if Xavier would return. Each evening, she would tell herself to stop wondering and focus on survival. She sharpened his knife with meticulous care, spending far more time on it than necessary, and kept it wrapped in the cloth he had given her. The coat transformed her existence. With proper warmth, she could work longer and more efficiently. Her fingers did not fumble as much, and she finished more tools each day, which meant slightly better meals. She even managed to save a few scraps of food to eat in the morning, breaking her fast with something more substantial than weak coffee. The other workers noticed the coat, of course. Mrs. Brennan asked where she had gotten it, and Lily said vaguely that she had traded some work for it. Frank the logger made a crude comment about what kind of work a woman might do to earn a coat, and Lily had turned on him with such fury in her eyes that he had actually stepped back. On the 4th day after Xavier had left, Lily was working at her bench when she heard raised voices from the other side of camp. She looked up to see a commotion near the main road. A group of loggers had gathered, and they seemed to be arguing with someone. Curious despite herself, Lily set down her whetstone and walked over to see what was happening. As she got closer, she recognized Xavier's voice rising above the others. "I am telling you, I tracked them here. Someone in this camp has seen my cattle. And I am telling you we do not have your damned cows," Hutchins growled. "Now get off my property before I have my men throw you off." Lily pushed through the crowd and saw Xavier standing face to face with the foreman. The cowboy's jaw was set in a stubborn line, and his hand rested on his hip near where his gun hung. Hutchins was flanked by 4 large loggers, all of whom looked ready for a fight. "I am not accusing anyone of stealing," Xavier said, his voice carefully controlled. "I am just asking if anyone has seen them. 12 head mixed brands probably came through here in the last few days. We are loggers, not cowboys. We do not pay attention to wandering cattle." Hutchins stepped closer, trying to use his bulk to intimidate. "Now leave before this gets ugly." Lily saw Xavier's hand twitch toward his gun, and she knew this was about to turn violent. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "I saw them," she said loudly. Everyone turned to look at her. Hutchins' face darkened with anger. "Stay out of this, girl. This does not concern you." "She works here, so she has a right to speak," Xavier said sharply. "Where did you see them?" Lily pointed northwest. "This morning early I went to fetch water from the creek. I saw a group of cattle grazing in the meadow about half a mile up the slope. They were still there when I came back an hour later." "That is logging company land," Hutchins said. "If there are cattle on it, they are trespassing." "Then you should be happy I am removing them," Xavier replied. He looked at Lily. "Can you show me exactly where?" "I can draw you a map if you have paper." "No need for maps," Hutchins interrupted. "You have your answer. Now go." Xavier held Lily's gaze for a long moment, and she saw gratitude there and something else she could not quite name. Then he nodded to her, turned on his heel, and walked back to where his horse was tied. The crowd dispersed, loggers returning to their work with disappointed looks, as if they had been hoping for a fight. Hutchins grabbed Lily's arm hard enough to bruise. "You keep your mouth shut about camp business," he hissed. "I do not care if you are sweet on that cowboy. You work for me and you do not talk to outsiders about what happens here. Understand?" "He was not asking about camp business," Lily said, trying to pull free. "He was asking about his cattle. Everything that happens within 5 miles of this camp is my business. You would do well to remember that." Hutchins released her arm with a shove that nearly sent her sprawling. "Now get back to work." Lily returned to her bench with her heart pounding. Her arm throbbed where Hutchins had grabbed her, and she knew there would be ugly bruises by tomorrow. But she did not regret speaking up. Xavier had helped her when he did not have to, and she had simply returned the favor. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept wandering to the meadow where she had seen the cattle. Would Xavier find them? Would he leave again without saying goodbye? The answer came 2 hours later when he rode back into camp, leading his horse and looking frustrated. He spotted Lily at her bench and came straight to her. "They were not there," he said without preamble. "I found where they had been grazing, plenty of sign, but they have moved on. I am sorry. They were definitely there this morning." "I believe you. Cattle wander. That is what they do." He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I have been chasing these animals for a week now. Every time I get close, they move on. Will you keep looking? I do not have much choice. I was hired to bring them back, and I gave my word." He studied her face, and his expression softened. "Did Hutchins give you trouble for speaking up?" Lily shrugged, trying to appear unconcerned. "Nothing I cannot handle." Xavier's eyes dropped to her arm where she was unconsciously rubbing the bruises. His jaw tightened. "He hurt you. He grabbed me. It is not the first time." "That does not make it right." Xavier looked back toward Hutchins' office, and Lily saw genuine anger in his eyes. "A man who hurts women is not a man at all. Anger will not help anything. Lily said quietly. I need this job and Hutchins knows it. If you make trouble for him, he will take it out on me after you leave. Xavier looked like he wanted to argue, but he held his tongue. Instead, he said, How much does he pay you? He does not pay me money. I sharpen tools in exchange for meals. That is not right either. You are doing skilled work. You should be getting actual wages. I know that, Lily said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. But I do not have other options. No one else will hire me. Xavier was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he said, I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? Lily asked warily. I need help tracking these cattle. They keep moving to places where I lose the trail. But you know this country and you clearly have sharp eyes. What if you came with me to help find them? I would pay you actual money, and once we round up the cattle, I would help you find proper work somewhere. Lily stared at him, certain she had misheard. You want me to leave camp and help you chase cows? I know it sounds strange, but think about it. You would earn real money, enough to get yourself set up somewhere better than this, and you would be away from Hutchins and his men. I do not know anything about cattle. You do not need to. You just need to help me track them and maybe help herd them once we find them. I can teach you the rest. It was tempting, dangerously so. The idea of leaving this camp, of earning actual money, of not having to sharpen axes until her hands bled, it called to something deep inside her. But it also terrified her. I do not know you, she said slowly. You seem kind, but I would be going into the wilderness alone with a strange man. You understand why that concerns me. I do, Xavier said immediately. And I would not blame you for refusing. But I give you my word, on my honor and my mother's grave, that I would never harm you or take advantage of you in any way. You would have your own bedroll, your own space, and if you ever felt unsafe, you could leave any time you wanted. Lily wanted to believe him. Every instinct told her that Xavier was telling the truth, that he was genuinely offering help without expecting anything inappropriate in return. But she had learned to be cautious. Let me think about it, she said. Take all the time you need. I am going to make another sweep of the area, see if I can pick up the trail again. I will be back before dark. He paused, then added, and Lily, you already have my knife, which is worth more than I have in cash right now. If I meant you harm, I would not have left you with a weapon. It was a good point, and it eased some of her worry. She nodded slowly. I will think about it. Xavier touched his hat brim and left, mounting his horse and riding off toward the northwest. Lily watched him go, then looked down at her hands, calloused, cut, permanently stained with metal dust and grease. She thought about the pile of axes waiting to be sharpened, about the thin stew and stale bread that would be her supper, about the cold lean to where she would sleep. Then she thought about earning real money, about learning a new skill, about the possibility of something better. By the time Xavier returned 3 hours later, Lily had made her decision. I will come with you, she said before she could lose her nerve. But I have conditions. Name them. First, you pay me the same as you would pay a man doing the same work. Second, if I want to leave at any point, you provide me with supplies and enough money to get to the nearest town safely. Third, you teach me everything you know about tracking and cattle, so that when this job is done, I have skills I can use to find other work. Xavier grinned. Those are fair conditions. I agree to all of them. I can pay you $3 a day plus food and supplies. Is that acceptable? $3 a day was more money than Lily had seen in months. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Good. Can you be ready to leave at first light tomorrow? I do not have much to pack, Lily said, but I should tell Hutchins I am leaving. You think that is wise? He might try to stop you. He cannot stop me. I am not his property, but I will not just disappear like a thief in the night. Xavier nodded slowly. You are right. That is the honorable thing to do. I will come with you if you want support. No, this is something I need to do myself. Lily found Hutchins in his office, going over ledgers by lamplight. He looked up when she entered, his expression already hostile. "What do you want?" "I am leaving," Lily said, keeping her voice steady. "I wanted to tell you so you can find someone else to sharpen your tools." Hutchins leaned back in his chair. "Leaving to do what? Run off with that cowboy? You think he is going to take care of you? What I do and why is not your concern. I am simply giving you notice. You do not get to just leave. You owe me." "I owe you nothing. I have done good work in exchange for meals. We are even." Hutchins stood up, and Lily instinctively took a step back. He was a big man, and she was suddenly very aware of how isolated his office was. "You think you are better than this place?" Hutchins said, moving around the desk toward her. "You think some cowboy is going to make your life better? He will use you up and leave you in a ditch somewhere, and then you will come crawling back here, begging for your old job." "If that happens, it will be my mistake to make," Lily said, backing toward the door. "But I am leaving either way." Hutchins reached for her, and Lily's hand went to the knife tucked in her belt. Xavier's knife, freshly sharpened and deadly sharp. She did not draw it, but the gesture was clear. "Touch me and I will cut you," she said quietly. Hutchins stopped, his eyes narrowing. "You have changed, girl. Got some fire in you now. That cowboy do that. I have always had fire. I just stopped hiding it." She turned and walked out of the office, half expecting Hutchins to come after her. But he let her go, and she made it back to her lean-to without incident. Lily spent the evening gathering her few possessions: her blanket, her tin cup, a spare shirt that was more holes than fabric, and Xavier's knife. She wrapped everything in her blanket and tied it into a bundle. Then she sat in the lean-to and waited for morning, too excited and nervous to sleep. Dawn came cold and clear. Lily dismantled her lean-to and left the materials for whoever might need them. She walked to the edge of camp, where Xavier was waiting with his horse saddled and a second horse, a sturdy bay gelding, standing beside it. "I borrowed him from a rancher friend," Xavier explained, gesturing to the bay. "Figured you would need your own mount. Have you ridden before?" "Not much, but I can learn." "Good." He helped her secure her bundle behind the saddle, then showed her how to mount. Lily settled herself awkwardly on the horse's back, gripping the saddle horn with white knuckles. Xavier swung up onto his own horse with effortless grace. "Ready." Lily looked back at the logging camp one last time. She saw a few loggers emerging from their tents, Mrs. Brennan stoking the cookhouse fire, Hutchins standing in the doorway of his office watching her leave. None of them waved or called out. She was leaving exactly as she had arrived, unnoticed and unmissed. She turned back to Xavier and nodded. "I am ready." They rode out as the sun rose over the Sierra Nevada, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Lily had no idea what she was riding toward, but anything was better than what she was leaving behind. Xavier set an easy pace, aware that Lily was not an experienced rider. He pointed out the trail signs as they went: broken branches, hoofprints in soft earth, places where cattle had grazed. Lily listened intently, trying to absorb everything he told her. "The key is learning to see what is out of place," Xavier explained. "Nature has patterns. When something breaks those patterns, that is your sign." They followed a creek bed for several miles, and Xavier showed her how to read the muddy banks for tracks. Sure enough, she spotted several cloven hoofprints pressed deep into the mud. "They came through here recently," Xavier said with satisfaction. "Within the last day. See how the edges of the prints are still sharp. If they were older, rain and wind would have softened them." "How many?" Lily asked. Xavier dismounted and studied the tracks more closely. "At least 8, maybe more. Hard to tell because they are walking over each other's prints, but this is definitely part of the group I am looking for." They continued following the creek until it split off into a narrow canyon. Xavier paused, studying the terrain with a practiced eye. "If I were a cow looking for shelter and food, I would head into that canyon," he said. "Protected from wind, probably water, and the slopes look like they might have decent grazing. Should we follow it? We should, but we need to be careful. Canyons can be tricky. If the cattle spook and stampede, there is nowhere to go." They entered the canyon slowly, riding single file with Xavier in the lead. Lily tried to keep her nervousness in check, trusting the bay gelding to follow the sorrel mare. The canyon walls rose steep and rocky on either side, covered with scrub pine and manzanita. A thin stream trickled down the center, and the air smelled of wet stone and evergreen. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that made Lily's heart beat faster. They had been riding for perhaps 20 minutes when Xavier suddenly held up a hand, signaling her to stop. He pointed ahead, and Lily saw them, a group of cattle grazing in a small meadow where the canyon widened. "There they are," Xavier whispered. 12 head, just like I was told. Now we need to get them moving in the right direction without spooking them." "How do we do that?" Slowly and carefully. "Follow my lead, and if they start to bolt, just get out of the way and let them go. We can always regroup and try again." Xavier dismounted and motioned for Lily to do the same. He explained that they would approach on foot, moving the cattle gently toward the canyon mouth. Once they got them moving in the right direction, they would mount up and herd them properly. They spent the next hour working the cattle, moving slowly and speaking in low, calm voices. Xavier showed Lily how to position herself to guide the animals without frightening them, how to read their body language to know when they were about to bolt. It was hard work, but Lily found it exhilarating. These were not dull axes or demanding loggers. These were living creatures with their own wills and instincts. She had to think and adapt, using her mind as much as her body. Finally, they got the cattle moving toward the canyon mouth. Xavier and Lily mounted up and rode behind the herd, keeping them bunched together and moving at a steady pace. "You are a natural," Xavier called to her as they rode. "Most people would have spooked them by now." Lily felt a flush of pride at the compliment. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt capable and useful, like she was doing something that mattered. They herded the cattle for the rest of the day, stopping occasionally to let the animals rest and graze. Xavier taught Lily the basics of cattle handling, how to turn the herd, how to keep stragglers from wandering off, how to identify which cow was the leader. As the sun began to set, Xavier called a halt. "We will make camp here and keep moving tomorrow." The ranch where these cattle belong is about 2 days' ride south. They found a suitable spot near a stream, with good grass for the horses and the cattle. Xavier showed Lily how to hobble the horses so they could graze without wandering off, then set about building a fire. Lily watched him work, noting the economical efficiency of his movements. He had clearly done this hundreds of times before. Within minutes, he had a fire crackling and was pulling supplies from his saddlebags. "I've got coffee, beans, and salt pork," he announced. "Not fancy, but it will fill your belly. After months of watery stew, anything sounds good." Xavier prepared the meal while Lily tended to the horses, brushing them down and checking their hooves the way he had shown her. By the time she finished, the food was ready. They ate in companionable silence, sitting on opposite sides of the fire. The stars began to emerge overhead, brilliant and uncountable in the clear mountain air. "Can I ask you something?" Lily said eventually. "Of course." "Why did you help me? Back at the camp, I mean. You did not know me." "I could have been anyone." Xavier was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "I have a younger sister," he said finally. "About your age. A few years back, she got into some trouble and ended up in a bad situation, working for people who treated her terribly. I was off driving cattle in Montana and did not know what was happening. By the time I found out and got back to help her, she had been through things no woman should have to endure. His voice was tight with old pain, and Lily felt her heart clench with sympathy. She is all right now, Xavier continued. Married to a good man, living on a farm in Oregon, but I think about how alone she must have felt, how desperate, and I wonder if anyone showed her kindness during that time. I wonder if someone helped her when I could not be there. He looked up at Lily across the fire. When I saw you at that logging camp, sharpening axes just to earn a meal, I saw my sister. I saw someone alone and struggling, and I thought maybe I could be the person who helped, the way I wish someone had helped her. Lily felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, for caring. Everyone deserves to be seen, Xavier said simply, and everyone deserves better than what you were getting at that camp. They fell silent again, but it was a comfortable silence now, the silence of two people beginning to understand each other. Later, Xavier showed Lily how to set up her bedroll and arrange her saddle as a pillow. He placed his own bedroll on the opposite side of the fire, giving her space and privacy. If you need anything during the night, just call out, he said. I am a light sleeper. Thank you for everything. Xavier tipped his hat to her, then settled into his blankets. Within minutes, she heard his breathing even out into sleep. Lily lay awake a while longer, staring up at the stars and listening to the night sounds of the wilderness, the horses shifting and breathing, the cattle lowing softly, an owl calling from somewhere in the trees. She thought about Xavier's sister, about her own struggles, about the strange paths that had led her to this moment. For the first time in 18 months, since her father had died and her world had fallen apart, Lily felt something like hope. The next 2 days passed in a blur of cattle herding, riding, and learning. Xavier was a patient teacher, and Lily absorbed everything he told her with the focused intensity of someone who knew this knowledge might save her life someday. He taught her to read the landscape, to find water and shelter, to understand weather signs in the clouds and wind. He showed her how to handle a rope, how to throw a basic loop, how to tie knots that would hold under pressure. He even let her practice with his gun, teaching her to load, aim, and fire, though she was not very good at it yet. You have got good instincts, Xavier told her after she managed to hit a tree stump on her 3rd try. You just need practice. They talked while they rode, sharing stories of their lives. Xavier told her about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about learning to ride before he could walk, about his father who had died when Xavier was 15, leaving him to help his mother raise his 3 younger siblings. That is why I became a cowboy, he explained. We needed money, and I was good with cattle. I have been working trail drives and ranch jobs ever since, sending most of my pay home to help support the family. Is that why you are not married? Lily asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. I am sorry, that is none of my business. It is all right, Xavier said with a slight smile. And yes, partly. Hard to court a woman when you are on the trail 9 months of the year, but also I just have not met the right person yet. I am not interested in marrying just for the sake of being married. When I settle down, I want it to be with someone I genuinely love and respect. Lily thought that was a fine sentiment, though she had long since given up on the idea of marriage for herself. What man would want a woman with no family, no money, and hands scarred from manual labor? She told Xavier about her childhood in Sacramento, about growing up in her father's blacksmith shop, learning the trade by watching him work. She talked about the heartbreak of losing him, the shock of discovering the debts, the desperate scramble to survive. I was so angry, she admitted. At my father for dying, at the creditors for taking everything, at the world for being so cruel. But eventually the anger burned itself out and I was left with just emptiness. And now, Xavier asked gently. Lily considered the question. Now I am not empty anymore. I am not sure what I am, but it is something more than empty. On the afternoon of the second day, they crested a ridge and saw a ranch spread out in the valley below a large main house, several barns, corrals full of horses and cattle, and fields of winter wheat. That is the Double R Ranch, Xavier said. These cattle belong to them. Or rather, they are part of a contract herd that got scattered during a storm crossing the mountains. The ranch owner paid me to round up the stragglers. They drove the cattle down to the ranch where they were greeted by the foreman, a grizzled man named Pete who looked Xavier up and down with approval. Heard you were good, Pete said. Finding all 12 head proves it. The boss will be pleased. I had help, Xavier said, gesturing to Lily. She tracked them down and helped me herd them back. Pete looked at Lily with surprise and something like respect. Is that so? Well, any friend of Xavier's is welcome here. Come on up to the house. The boss will want to settle the account. The ranch owner, a wealthy man named Robert Randall, paid Xavier the agreed-upon fee plus a bonus for finding all the cattle undamaged. Xavier counted out half the money and handed it to Lily without hesitation. Your share, he said. You earned it. Lily stared at the bills in her hand, more money than she had held in her entire life. $18. It was not a fortune, but to her it felt like one. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank yourself. You did the work. Mr. Randall invited them to stay for supper and spend the night in the bunkhouse, and they gratefully accepted. The meal was substantial roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie. Lily ate until she was uncomfortably full, savoring every bite. After supper, Xavier pulled Mr. Randall aside and spoke to him in low tones. Lily could not hear what they were saying, but she saw Mr. Randall glance at her several times and nod thoughtfully. When Xavier returned, he looked pleased. I asked Mr. Randall if he knew of any work for you. He said his wife has been looking for someone to help her with the household work, cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. The wages are not great, but you would have room and board, and Mrs. Randall is supposed to be a kind woman. Lily's heart sank a little. After the excitement and challenge of the last few days, the idea of returning to domestic work felt like a step backward. But she knew she should be grateful for any honest work. That is very kind of him, she said, trying to sound enthusiastic. Xavier studied her face and seemed to see through her forced smile. Or, he said slowly, you could come with me. Come with you where? I just picked up another job. A rancher up near Nevada City needs help driving a herd to market in Sacramento. It is a 2-week job, maybe 3. I could use a partner, and you have proven you have got the skills. Lily felt her heart leap. You want me to work as a cowboy, cowgirl, technically. But yes, the pay would be the same as before, $3 a day plus expenses. And when the job is done, I can help you find work in Sacramento if you want. It is a bigger city, more opportunities. But I barely know what I am doing. I have only been doing this for 3 days. You are learning fast and you do not panic under pressure. That is more important than experience. Xavier paused. But I will not push you. If you would rather take the job here, I understand. It is safer and more stable. Lily looked toward the ranch house, thinking about a life of cooking and cleaning for someone else. Then she looked at Xavier, remembering the thrill of tracking the cattle, the satisfaction of herding them successfully, the pride she had felt in doing skilled work. I want to come with you, she said firmly. If you will have me. Xavier's face broke into a genuine smile. the kind that reached his eyes and made him look younger and more carefree. "I was hoping you would say that." They left the Double R Ranch the next morning, headed northeast toward Nevada City. The rancher Xavier had mentioned, a man named Thomas Winters, had a herd of about 200 cattle that needed to be driven to the stockyards in Sacramento before the heavy snows made the mountain passes impassable. The ride to the Winters Ranch took 3 days, and Xavier used the time to teach Lily more advanced skills. He showed her how to read cattle moods, how to identify sick or injured animals, how to estimate the weight and age of livestock. He taught her about the land they were crossing, pointing out landmarks and explaining the geography. They also talked about more personal things. Xavier told her about his dreams of one day owning his own ranch, a modest spread where he could raise quality cattle and horses. Lily talked about her love of working with metal, how she had wanted to follow in her father's footsteps and become a smith. "Why could you not?" Xavier asked. "Women blacksmiths are rare but not unheard of." "Because no one would hire me as an apprentice after my father died, and I could not afford to set up my own shop. All the tools were sold to pay debts." "Maybe someday you will have your own shop again," Xavier said. "If you keep saving your wages, it could happen." The idea seemed impossibly distant, but Lily allowed herself to imagine it a small forge of her own, customers who respected her work, financial independence. It was a dream worth holding on to. They arrived at the Winters Ranch on a cold afternoon in early December. Thomas Winters was a no-nonsense man in his 50s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He looked Lily over with obvious skepticism. "Xavier tells me you are a capable hand," Winters said. "I hope he is right, because this drive is going to be tough. We have got to get these cattle to Sacramento before the snow hits, which means we will be moving fast and hard." "I will keep up," Lily said, meeting his gaze steadily. Winters grunted. "We will see. You will be working with 3 other drovers, my sons Ben and Charlie, and a man named Hector who has been with us for years. They are good men, but they are not used to working with women. There might be some tension." "I can handle tension." "Good. Because if you slow us down or cause problems, you are out. I do not care if Xavier vouches for you or not." It was harsh, but Lily appreciated the honesty. She would rather know where she stood than deal with false pleasantries. The drive began the next morning. The herd was larger than anything Lily had worked with before, a sea of brown and black bodies that stretched across the winter meadow. The noise was overwhelming, lowing cattle, shouting men, the thunder of hooves. Winter's sons were young men in their early 20s, both handsome in a rough-hewn way. Ben was tall and quiet, while Charlie was shorter and more talkative. They greeted Lily with polite nods but clear skepticism. Hector, a weathered Mexican man in his 40s, was friendlier, greeting her in accented English and offering tips on handling the herd. The first day of the drive was brutal. Keeping 200 cattle moving in the right direction required constant vigilance and quick reflexes. Lily was assigned to ride drag, the worst position, eating dust at the back of the herd and chasing down stragglers. Her eyes burned, her throat was parched, and every muscle in her body ached by the time Winters called a halt for the night. Xavier found her as she was tending to her horse, slumped with exhaustion. "First day is always the hardest," he said sympathetically. "How are you holding up?" "I feel like I was trampled by the entire herd," Lily admitted, "but I am still here." "That is what matters. Here, drink some water." He handed her his canteen, and she drank gratefully. Over the next few days, Lily proved herself. She learned to anticipate where the cattle would try to break away, how to work in coordination with the other drovers, how to keep moving even when every part of her body screamed for rest. Slowly, she earned the respect of the other men. Ben remained quiet and distant, but Charlie started greeting her in the mornings and occasionally offering encouragement. Hector openly praised her work, telling her she had the instincts of someone who had been doing this for years. Xavier was always there, watching out for her but not hovering. He treated her like an equal partner, asking her opinion on routes and strategies, teaching her new skills during the evening camps. They were 5 days into the drive when trouble struck. A group of riders appeared on a ridge overlooking the herd. 6 men on horseback, rough-looking and heavily armed. "Rustlers," Winters said grimly. "Everyone stay calm. Let me do the talking." The riders descended the ridge and approached the herd. Their leader was a scarred man with a cruel mouth and cold eyes. He rode straight up to Winters without any pretense of friendliness. "Nice herd you got here," the rustler said. "We will be taking about 50 head. Call it a toll for crossing our territory." "This is not your territory," Winters replied evenly, "and I am not giving you any cattle. Then we will take them, along with anything else we want." The rustler's eyes swept over the group and landed on Lily. His expression changed to something predatory. "Or maybe we will take that instead." Xavier moved his horse between Lily and the rustler, his hand dropping to his gun. "You will not touch her." The rustler laughed. "Protective, are we? Maybe we should take her just to see what you will do about it." "You can try," Xavier said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made the rustler's smile falter. Winters spoke up quickly, trying to defuse the situation. "Gentlemen, there is no need for violence. I cannot give you cattle, but I can offer you money. $50 to let us pass peacefully." The rustler considered this, his eyes flicking between Xavier's steady gun hand and the other drovers, who had all armed themselves. The odds were about even, and a shootout would be costly for both sides. $100, the rustler countered. 75, and that is my final offer." The rustler spat in the dirt but nodded. "Fine, give us the money and you can go." Winters counted out the money with barely concealed anger. The rustlers took it and rode off, but not before their leader cast one last lingering look at Lily that made her skin crawl. Once they were gone, Winters turned to Xavier. "Thank you for keeping your head. I was worried there was going to be bloodshed." "They were not going to touch her," Xavier said flatly. "I do not care how many of them there were." Lily felt a strange warmth in her chest at his words, a feeling she could not quite name. Xavier had been willing to risk his life to protect her, and the realization shook something loose inside her. That night, as they made camp, Lily found Xavier checking the horses. She approached him hesitantly. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for standing up for me today." "You do not need to thank me. Any decent man would have done the same. Maybe, but you did it, and I want you to know it meant something." Xavier looked at her in the firelight, and she saw something shift in his expression. "Lily, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" He seemed to struggle with the words for a moment, then said, "These past few weeks, working with you, getting to know you, it has meant more to me than I expected. You are brave and smart and determined, and I admire you more than I can say." Lily's heart began to beat faster. "Xavier, let me finish. I know I said this was just a job, that I was helping you the way I wished someone had helped my sister, and that was true at first, but somewhere along the way it became more than that for me. I find myself thinking about you when I should be thinking about cattle. I look forward to our conversations at the end of the day. And when that rustler looked at you, I felt something I have never felt before, a rage so strong I would have killed him without hesitation." He took a step closer to her. "I do not want to make you uncomfortable, and if you do not feel the same way, I will never mention this again. But I need you to know that I care about you, Lily, as more than a friend or a work partner." Lily felt like her heart might burst out of her chest. She had been trying so hard not to acknowledge her own growing feelings for Xavier, telling herself it was just gratitude or admiration. But hearing him voice what she had been denying made it impossible to hide from the truth. "I care about you too," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, because I thought it would only lead to heartbreak, but I cannot help it. You have shown me more kindness than anyone in my life, and you have made me feel capable and valued." And she could not finish the sentence because Xavier had closed the distance between them and was kissing her. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and asking permission even as it happened. Lily melted into it, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beat through his shirt, fast and strong, matching her own. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for days," he admitted. "I wish you had done it sooner," Lily said, and was rewarded with his laugh. They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, before the reality of their situation reasserted itself. They were in the middle of a cattle drive, surrounded by other men, with work that needed to be done. "We should probably get back before someone notices we are missing," Xavier said reluctantly. "Probably," Lily agreed, but neither of them moved. Finally, Xavier stepped back, though he kept hold of her hand. "When this drive is over, I want to court you properly. Take you to dinner, walk with you in town, all the things a man is supposed to do when he cares about a woman." "I would like that," Lily said, feeling a smile spread across her face. They returned to the camp separately, trying to be discreet. But when Lily caught Hector's knowing smile across the fire, she suspected they had not been as subtle as they thought. The rest of the drive passed in a blur of hard work and stolen moments. Xavier and Lily tried to maintain professionalism during the day, but at night they would find excuses to talk privately, sharing stories and dreams and kisses under the stars. Charlie noticed and teased Xavier good-naturedly. Ben remained disapproving, but kept his opinions to himself. Hector was openly happy for them, telling Lily that Xavier was a good man who deserved happiness. They drove the cattle through increasingly difficult terrain as they descended from the mountains toward the valley. The weather grew colder, and snow began to fall, dusting the landscape in white. Winters pushed them hard, determined to reach Sacramento before the roads became impassable. On the 14th day, they crested a final ridge and saw Sacramento spread out below them, a growing city on the banks of the Sacramento River. Lily felt a complicated mix of emotions: relief that the journey was almost over, but sadness that it would end this adventure. They drove the cattle into the stockyards on a gray December afternoon. Winters sold the herd for a good price and paid everyone their wages. Lily counted her money with amazement, $42 more than she had ever earned in her life. Winters shook her hand gravely. "You did good work," he said. "I will admit I had my doubts, but you proved me wrong. If you ever need a reference, you can use my name." "Thank you, sir." "That means a great deal." The drovers went their separate ways, with Ben and Charlie heading back to their father's ranch, and Hector taking a job with a ranch further south. Xavier and Lily found themselves standing in the busy streets of Sacramento, suddenly alone together for the first time in weeks. "So," Xavier said. "What now?" Lily looked around at the city where she had grown up, where her father had worked and died, where she had lost everything. It looked different now, less like a place of pain and more like a place of possibility. "I suppose I should look for work," she said. "Maybe find a room to rent. Or," Xavier said carefully, "you could come with me to meet my family." Lily stared at him. "You want me to meet your family?" "I do. They live in Oregon, about a week's ride north. My mother and siblings are there, including my sister Sarah, the one I told you about. I think you would like her, and I know she would like you." "Xavier, are you sure? That is a big step." "I know." But I meant what I said about courting you properly, and part of that is introducing you to the people who matter most to me." He took her hands in his. "Lily, I know we have not known each other very long, but I am sure about my feelings. I want a future with you if you want that too." Lily felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears this time. "I want that too, more than anything. Then come to Oregon with me, meet my family, and if you still feel the same way after that, then maybe we can start talking about making this permanent." The implication of permanent made Lily's heart race, but it was not fear she felt, it was excitement. For the first time since her father died, she had a future to look forward to, one that did not involve just surviving day to day but actually living and building something lasting. "When do we leave?" she asked. Xavier's smile was brilliant. "Tomorrow morning. But tonight I am taking you to the best restaurant in Sacramento for that proper dinner I promised you." True to his word, Xavier took her to a fine restaurant with white tablecloths and candles on the tables. Lily had never been anywhere so fancy, and she felt self-conscious in her worn travel clothes. But Xavier looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, and gradually her nervousness faded. They talked for hours over a meal of roast chicken, vegetables, and fresh bread. Xavier told her more about his family, painting a picture of a close-knit household full of love and laughter. Lily told him about her hopes of one day returning to smithing, maybe opening a small forge if she could save enough money. "I will help you," Xavier said immediately. "Whatever you need to make that dream happen, we will figure it out together." "Together," Lily repeated, liking the sound of that word. After dinner, they walked along the Sacramento River, watching the last light fade from the sky. Xavier pulled Lily close against the cold and she rested her head on his shoulder. "I keep thinking this is all a dream," she admitted, "that I will wake up back at the logging camp, sharpening axes and slowly starving." "It is not a dream," Xavier assured her. "This is real. We are real. And I am going to make sure you never have to sharpen axes for supper ever again." Lily laughed softly. "I did not mind the axes so much. It was the empty stomach and the loneliness that got to me." "Well, you will never be lonely again. That is a promise." They stood there by the river, holding each other, until the stars emerged overhead. Then Xavier walked Lily to a respectable boarding house where he had secured her a room for the night. He kissed her good night on the front steps, sweet and lingering, before forcing himself to step back. "Tomorrow," he said, "we start our journey to Oregon and to whatever comes next." "I cannot wait," Lily said honestly. The journey to Oregon took 8 days through winter weather that alternated between cold rain and occasional snow. They traveled through the Sacramento Valley, crossed into the Willamette Valley, and finally arrived at a modest farm outside a small town called Silverton. The Ashford family farm was not large or fancy, but it was well maintained and clearly loved. The main house was a sturdy wooden structure with a covered porch, surrounded by outbuildings and fenced pastures. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Lily could see chickens pecking in a yard near the barn. As they rode up, the front door burst open and people poured out: a middle-aged woman with graying hair and Xavier's eyes, 2 young men who had to be his brothers, and a young woman with a baby on her hip. "Xavier," the older woman cried, running to meet him. "Oh, my boy, we have been so worried." Xavier dismounted and swept his mother into a hug that lifted her off her feet. "I am fine, Ma. Just been working." His brothers pounded him on the back, grinning widely. The young woman with the baby approached more slowly, her expression cautious but warming when she saw Xavier's smile. "Sarah," Xavier said gently, going to hug his sister. "You look well." "How is the baby? Growing like a weed," Sarah said, but her eyes had moved to Lily, who was still sitting on her horse, feeling suddenly very out of place. Xavier seemed to remember her and quickly turned. "Everyone, I want you to meet someone very important. This is Lily Jane. She is the woman I told you about in my letter." Lily had not known Xavier sent a letter ahead, but she was grateful for it now as she dismounted and faced his family. They looked at her with curiosity and welcome rather than suspicion. "So you are the woman who can sharpen axes and herd cattle," Xavier's mother said, coming forward to take Lily's hands. "My son wrote that he had met someone remarkable, and I can see he was not exaggerating. Welcome to our home, dear. I am Margaret Ashford, but you must call me Margaret." "Thank you, madam," Lily said, feeling overwhelmed by the warmth of the greeting. The rest of the family introduced themselves in a blur. Xavier's brothers were named Nathan and Peter, both in their late teens. Sarah's husband was named James, and their baby was a chubby boy named Thomas. They ushered Lily and Xavier into the house, which was warm and filled with the smell of baking bread. Margaret immediately began preparing food, waving away Lily's offers to help. "You are a guest, and you have been traveling for days. Sit and rest." Over dinner, Xavier told his family about their adventures: the logging camp, the cattle drives, the rustlers. He spoke about Lily's skills and courage with obvious pride, and Lily felt herself blushing under the attention. After the meal, Sarah pulled Lily aside while the others were clearing dishes. "I wanted to thank you," Sarah said quietly. "For what?" "For making my brother happy. I have not seen him smile like that in years." Sarah shifted baby Thomas to her other hip. "Xavier told me in his letter about your circumstances, about how you were working just to eat. I understand what that feels like. After my first husband died and before I met James, I was in a dark place too." So when Xavier writes that he met someone who was struggling but refused to give up, someone with fire and determination, I knew you were someone special. Lily felt a lump in her throat. "Your brother saved my life. I do not mean that dramatically, I mean it literally. I would not have survived another winter at that logging camp." "He says you saved each other, that you reminded him what it means to fight for something better." Sarah smiled. "He wants to marry you, you know. He asked Pa before he died if he could use Ma's wedding ring when he found the right woman. He has been carrying it for years, waiting." Lily's heart skipped a beat. "He has not asked me yet. He will. Xavier does not do anything halfway. When he commits to something, it is with his whole heart." Later that evening, Xavier and Lily took a walk around the farm. The night was cold but clear, and their breath misted in the air. Xavier showed her the barn, the chicken coop, the small orchard where fruit trees stood bare in winter sleep. "This is not much," he said, "but it is home. My father built most of it with his own hands. After he died, we all worked to keep it going so Ma would not lose it." "It is beautiful," Lily said honestly. "I can feel the love in every board and nail." Xavier stopped walking and turned to face her. "Lily, I know we have not been together very long. By some standards, this is going to seem too fast. But I have spent years drifting from job to job, never putting down roots because I did not have a reason to stay anywhere. Now I have a reason. You are my reason." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. Even in the dim moonlight, Lily could see it was old and well-worn, polished smooth by years of love. "This was my mother's wedding ring, and before that, her mother's. My father gave it to Ma when they married, and before he died, he told me to give it to the woman I wanted to spend my life with." Xavier took Lily's hand. "Lily Jane, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my days making you happy, supporting your dreams and loving you with everything I have?" Lily felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Xavier, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he kissed her, deep and passionate, pouring all his love and hope and promise into that single embrace. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing and crying at the same time. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and when they entered, the family took one look at Lily's ring and erupted into cheers and congratulations. Margaret hugged them both fiercely, crying happy tears. Nathan and Peter pounded Xavier on the back and welcomed Lily as their new sister. Sarah and James offered their blessings, and baby Thomas gurgled cheerfully, sensing the joy around him. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the local church. Lily wore a dress that had been Sarah's, altered to fit her smaller frame. Xavier wore his best clothes, his dark hair slicked back and his eyes shining with happiness. The whole town came to the wedding, it seemed. Word had spread about the cowboy who had found love with a woman who sharpened axes, and people were charmed by the story. Lily was overwhelmed by the outpouring of goodwill from people she had never met. During the ceremony, as she and Xavier exchanged vows, Lily thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had lost everything: her father, her home, her livelihood, and had been reduced to the most desperate circumstances. But through that darkness, she had found strength she did not know she possessed. And then she had found Xavier, who had seen her worth when she could barely see it herself. "I do," she said when the minister asked if she took Xavier as her husband, and those 2 words felt like the most important she had ever spoken. "I do," Xavier echoed, his voice strong and sure. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier kissed her with such tenderness that Lily felt like her heart might overflow. The church erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held at the Ashford farm, with tables set up in the barn and food provided by what seemed like every family in the county. There was music and dancing, laughter and toasts. Lily found herself swept up in it all, dancing with Xavier and then with his brothers and James, and even some of the local men who wanted to congratulate the bride. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the farm, Xavier pulled Lily aside. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Lily replied honestly. "Good, because this is just the beginning." Xavier and Lily spent their first months of marriage living with his family while they saved money and made plans. Xavier took various jobs: ranch work, cattle drives, anything that paid well. Lily, meanwhile, began to pursue her dream of smithing again. She started small, doing repair work in the barn using tools she borrowed or purchased cheaply. Word spread that she was skilled with metalwork, and soon people were bringing her items to fix broken tools, damaged wagon parts, horseshoes that needed replacing. Xavier supported her completely, never questioning whether a woman should be doing such work. He even helped her build a small forge on the property, spending his few free hours hauling stone and constructing a proper workspace. By their first anniversary, Lily had a thriving small business. She was not just doing repairs anymore, but creating new pieces: custom ironwork, decorative items, specialized tools. Her work was good enough that people came from neighboring towns to commission pieces. Xavier, meanwhile, had saved enough money to purchase a small herd of cattle. He and his brothers were building up their own ranch operation, separate from but connected to the family farm. The dream he had shared with Lily back on that first cattle drive was becoming reality. On a warm summer evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lily shared news that would change their lives again. "Xavier, I am pregnant," she said, her hand moving instinctively to her still flat stomach. Xavier's face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, fear, wonder, before settling on pure happiness. He pulled her into a careful embrace as if she were made of glass. "We are having a baby," he whispered in awe. "We are," Lily confirmed. "Are you ready to be a father?" "I am terrified," Xavier admitted, "but also more excited than I have ever been in my life." Their son was born the following spring, a healthy baby with Xavier's dark hair and Lily's gray eyes. They named him Henry James Ashford, after both their fathers. Holding Henry for the first time, Lily was struck by the realization of how far she had come. 2 years ago, she had been alone and desperate, sharpening axes just to earn enough food to survive. Now she had a husband she loved, a thriving business, and a son whose future was full of possibility. Xavier looked at her holding their baby and smiled. "Remember when I told you to put down that axe and eat?" Lily laughed. "I remember thinking you were the most presumptuous man I had ever met. And now I think you were the best thing that ever happened to me." The years that followed were not without challenges. There were hard winters when money was tight, summers when drought threatened the cattle, and the constant work of building a life from nothing. But Xavier and Lily faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing season. They had 3 more children, 2 daughters, Emma and Grace, and another son, William. Lily continued her smithing work, teaching Emma the trade when the girl showed interest. Xavier's cattle operation grew into a successful ranch, and he became known throughout the region as an honest dealer and skilled rancher. Sarah and James remained close, their farm neighboring the Ashford ranch. Margaret lived long enough to see all her grandchildren born, passing peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72. Xavier's brothers both married and built their own homes nearby, creating a sprawling extended family that gathered for every holiday and celebration. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Xavier and Lily took a trip back to Jamestown, California. The logging camp where they had met was long gone, abandoned when the easily accessible timber ran out. But the town was still there, grown larger and more prosperous. They stood on the ridge overlooking where the camp had been, remembering. "I was so scared back then," Lily said. "So alone and uncertain about everything." "You were also the bravest person I had ever met," Xavier replied. "You kept going even when you had every reason to give up." "Only because you gave me hope. You saw something in me worth saving." Xavier turned to face her, his hair now threaded with gray but his eyes still the same creek water blue-green she had fallen in love with. "I did not save you, Lily. You saved yourself. You just needed someone to believe in you while you did it." Lily thought about that and realized he was right. Xavier had helped her, had given her opportunities and support, but the strength to take those opportunities had come from within herself. She had survived the logging camp, learned to herd cattle, built a business, raised a family all through her own determination and skill. "We saved each other," she said finally. "How about that? I can accept that." They returned to Oregon with renewed appreciation for everything they had built. Their children were growing. Henry was preparing to take over more of the ranch operations. Emma was establishing herself as a skilled smith in her own right. Grace was showing talent for numbers and business. And young William was still figuring out his path, but showed promise in everything he tried. Xavier and Lily settled into the comfortable rhythm of a long marriage, finishing each other's sentences and communicating with glances across crowded rooms. They still took morning rides together when time allowed, still stole kisses in the barn when they thought no one was looking, still talked late into the night about dreams and memories and plans for the future. On a crisp autumn evening many years after their first meeting, when Lily was 68 and Xavier was 72, they sat together on their porch watching the sun set over the ranch they had built together. Their children and grandchildren were inside, the house full of noise and laughter and life. "Do you ever regret it?" Lily asked. "Tying yourself to a woman who sharpened axes for supper," Xavier laughed, the sound rich and warm. Not for a single moment. Best decision I ever made was telling you to put that axe down and eat. Best decision I ever made was listening to you. He took her hand, his fingers threading through hers with the ease of decades of practice. We have had a good life, Lily Jane Ashford. We have had an amazing life, Xavier Ashford. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Around them was everything they had built: the ranch, the forge, the family, the love that had sustained them through every challenge and triumph. Lily thought back to that desperate young woman sharpening axes in a logging camp, barely surviving day to day. She wished she could tell that girl that everything would be all right, that help was coming in the form of a kind cowboy with blue-green eyes and a gentle smile. She wished she could tell her that the pain and struggle would lead to more happiness than she could imagine. But maybe that girl already knew, somewhere deep inside. Maybe that was why she had kept going, kept surviving, kept sharpening those axes day after day. Because somewhere in her heart she had believed that she deserved better, that life had more to offer, and she had been right. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars emerged, Xavier stood and offered Lily his hand. "Come inside. Our family is waiting." Lily took his hand and let him help her up, her joints protesting slightly but her spirit as strong as ever. Together, they walked into their home, into the warmth and light and love that they had created together. It had started with axes and hunger, with desperation and loneliness. But it had become something beautiful: a partnership built on mutual respect, a love that deepened with time, a family that would carry their legacy forward for generations. As Lily crossed the threshold into the house full of her children and grandchildren, Xavier's hand warm in hers, she smiled. She had sharpened axes for loggers to earn supper, and a cowboy had said, "Put that down and eat." And from that simple beginning, they had built an entire world.